Good evening,
Rod,
good morning.
good afternoon, good evening to you, Rod. I can hear you, but I'm not seeing you just yet.
Can't
If
yet
you're,
see me, okay.
but maybe Jatin can see you. It's not that important that I actually, because
Hi, Chetan.
Hey, nice to see you.
Start video. Okay, there we go.
Yeah,
Rod,
that's all right.
Here I am. Yeah, the real me.
good to see you, Rod. I'm not sure if I'm up there in pictures, am I?
You are?
Good.
Dennis is not, but everybody else is.
Okay, Leon, I'm sorry. Jatin, can you pull me in?
You are in already. You have to turn on your
But we
video
don't have
from your phone.
My video's not up there. I'm not seeing,
Oh.
you're not seeing me.
We can
Yeah,
hear
but
you, but we can't see.
Audio is okay, right? Yeah.
I'm not, wait a second. No participant share. Start video. One second, let me see. Start video. Ah, there we go.
Aha,
There you go.
aha.
Right, there we go. So, Jatin and Leon's there.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, you know, I want to welcome Rod. Thank him for taking time out of his busy schedule to be with us this afternoon on the cricket show. I'm
It's a
sorry
pleasure.
that we were unable to get the live feature that we wanted for on the day of the broadcast, but such is the life these days with technicalities, dealing with digital information and digital equipment. So we have to resort to doing this, and we'll record this for our show on Sunday. Rod, we are aware that you are now enjoying the retired life.
That is true.
Also aware that you know, you carry amongst your title an academic and one who has played a significant role in cricket as far as the Dutch cricket board is concerned, because you actually spent some time as a vice chair. So
That's true. Yeah.
I've read your pieces and I was very curious to know, how is it someone living all the way out there in Australia knows so much about cricket in the Netherlands? Now I know, having seen your profile. So welcome.
Yep. And I have lots of contacts in the Netherlands, even though I've been here for 2.5 years, because Australia's borders have been closed because of the pandemic.
You're right. Okay. So Leon, can you introduce yourself to Rod? Leon?
You've gone mute.
Yes. Leon is muted. Jatin?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Can you just introduce yourself to Rod?
Yes, Rod. My name is Jatin Patel. I'm more of on the coaching side, part of the USA Cricket Development, and also been training so many coaches in this country, also Cricket Hall of Famer, and one of the panelists on this radio show for last many years. And probably all we talk is all about cricket.
Aha. What else is there?
Well, nothing much, you know that. Yeah.
Now, any sign of Leon being able to come in and say hello?
Leon is there. I can see him. The picture is there, but we are not able to hear him or.
Okay. Well, I think maybe we will just proceed until you're able to pull Leon in and get some information from him. Rod, I was hoping that perhaps you could give us a brief, if you like, resume, not resume, but a brief history or description of your article, ICC and Global Growth. I have to inform you that I do have a copy of it in front of me, but I also am aware that maybe, you know, since you're in the hot seat, we'd love to hear your thoughts coming directly out of your mouth so that we can then, you know, pick the pieces up and run with it.
Well, yeah, thanks, Dennis. Not for the first time. Back in November, I wrote a piece in a white heat about an ICC document. I mean, the timing of that document could scarcely have been unhappier. What they did was they launched their new plan for global growth, as they called it. It was a 2-page A4 glossy, full of slogans and management speak, but very few figures. And the only figures that it contained were about fan engagement. No figures about numbers playing. They were talking about an increase in the numbers playing. They were talking about developing cricket in the associate countries, but there were very few concrete details about how they were going to do that. And in many ways, it was a much less developed plan than the 2 or 3 or 4 plans for global growth that we had seen over the past 2 decades. Furthermore, it committed to meaningful competitive cricket for the associate countries at exactly the moment, well, 4 days after they had announced that they were abandoning the Super League, the 13-team Super League, which gave one associate country at any rate in the current cycle, happened to be the Netherlands. Well, it didn't happen to be the Netherlands. The Netherlands qualified to take part, and it was huge for them. And although it's been severely disrupted by the pandemic, as so much has been, the ICC announced that they were going to abandon that experiment before it had been completed, before it had really been given a chance, and that they were going to revert to basing qualification for global tournaments on rankings. The ranking system, the ICC ranking system, is quite frankly a disaster. I think everybody accepts that it's a disaster. We are seeing consequences of that literally as we speak in the tournament in Oman, where the Philippines happen to finish top of the rankings, or the highest on the rankings for that tournament, based on a very, very inadequate series of matches in terms of competitive cricket. And they got the gig ahead of, say, Vanuatu, who are on paper and on the field, which is where it matters, clearly a much stronger side. So the fact that they said, okay, we're going to go back to bilaterals because bilaterals and rankings are what the big countries want, and basically the smaller countries can go and get stuff, was so incongruous, so such a sharp contrast with all the fine-sounding words that the ICC produced in these 2 glossy pages, that I simply pointed out in 900 words where the discrepancies were. That it's great that they want to develop women's cricket, that they want to, that they say they want to increase the number of teams taking part in the major global tournaments, and they are indeed taking steps in that direction. But it's been so slow, it's so unplanned, the development has been so incoherent, and there have been so many backward steps over the past 20 years. And I can talk a bit more about that later on. I have to say, I saw red, and that article was the result.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Jatin, any sign of Leon being able to come to the front? Jatin?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Well, we'll continue. If you don't mind, Rod, what I'll do is I'll just ask a few questions based on, I mean, I'll kind of hopscotch across your article as opposed to, going chronologically.
Yep, sure.
Jatin, I've lost Rod from my, okay, thank you. Now, you mentioned expanding the fan base. Can we not accept that investment in growth markets will translate into incremental growth in the fan base? And if the fan base is growing, is that not an indicator of the growth of the game worldwide?
I don't think so. I think there is a huge existing fan base and a potential fan base. For example, in the subcontinental diaspora, wherever cricket lovers from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh may be, Nepal, they will follow cricket, and that is a given. And there are many countries around the world where cricket would not exist, probably, were it not for that diaspora. But there is a huge difference between a fan base, which is essentially passive, which watches, which engages with, which supports online, for example, if the streaming is good enough, and the streaming is often not good enough, particularly where the associates are concerned. So I don't have a quarrel with developing the fan base as such. My problem comes when you substitute developing the fan base for developing cricket. What's important is not so much that we have lots of people watching streamed cricket on their computers and engaging via social media. What's important is that we have more and more players across the 100+ members of the ICC and countries which are not yet members of the ICC, which are often doing really good developmental work. What's important is that those countries see more and more players, boys and girls, men and women. And that's where the focus should be. I think it's much more important that the focus should be on finding practical ways to develop cricket in countries across every continent. Yes, people from the diasporas, expats, but also people from what we might call the indigenous population. If cricket is going to become stronger in, choose a random country, the Czech Republic, or Costa Rica, it is vitally important that the players that the expats who currently run cricket and enjoy playing cricket in those countries are able to reach out and get Czechs, Costa Ricans playing cricket. Yeah. The long-term future of cricket involves grassroots involvement of the native population in every country. And they need help with that. That's not something which happens automatically. Where cricket is a tiny minority sport, the sources of funding locally are necessarily very restricted. When the ICC retreated from its development strategy, the strategy which had been in place from around 2000 to around 2010, 2012, maybe even 2015, when they pulled the plug on that, they said, oh, we can't go on funding cricket in these minority countries. You've got to find your own sponsorship. You've got to find your own local support. But they offered no serious help in how you might do that. And even a country which has a long cricketing history like the Netherlands, where cricket goes back to the 19th century, where there's been a national team and a national competition since 1891, the prospect, I know because I've been involved in it, the finding of sponsorship is a huge problem. And it's only when you get serious exposure, where you get full member test sites coming to play ODIs, where you get the possibility of maybe even getting onto television, onto local free-to-air television. It's only when that starts to happen, and when you've got tournament commitments at home and abroad, which you can sell to a sponsor, it's only when that kind of happens, when that starts to become possible, that you have any realistic prospect of getting the kind of local funding you need in order to put down realistic roots in the local community. And to take a concrete example, Ryan Campbell, the Dutch national coach, tweeted this morning in response to the fact that the live streaming from the T20 qualifier in Oman, which started yesterday, the live streaming has been a disaster. I don't know whether you've seen any of it, but games where you simply couldn't watch the game. They advertised they were going to show it, and then the feed didn't work. And Ryan Campbell rightly says, tough if you've sold a sponsor the fact that this is going to be live streamed, and then it isn't.
Then it isn't.
So it's all very well to have fine words about digital engagement and building the fan base, but if you can't deliver on the most simple of those commitments on a practical basis, and if you have no serious strategies for getting cricket out into the local communities, then it doesn't matter what fine words you have and what glossy paper you print them on.
Thank you. Jatin, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but is there any sign of Leon being visible and oral?
Leon is visible, but he is not able to communicate. That's what I can see.
Looks like he's having microphone issues, Rod.
Yep, as always.
How well we know that. All right, well, let's proceed. Now, one of the statements you made in the article, Rod, was that money in the coffers of powerful members. Now, in recent years, there has been an exponential growth in individual or corporate-owned cricket franchises, such as the various T20 franchises. Do you consider these franchises to be channeling money into the coffers of powerful members? Are these franchises no different to a McDonald's or Burger King investment business? What is your thought?
Yeah, I think there are several issues wrapped up in that question. I mean, what I was thinking about when I wrote that sentence was the fact that over the last 10 years, we have seen a severe reduction in the amount of money from ICC sources, which goes to the associate members. The associate members' share of the budget was slashed when what a lot of people call the Gang of Three, India, Australia, and England, staged what was essentially a coup to take over the running of the ICC, and they slashed the money that was going to go to the associates. There was some restoration when the other full members fought back, and there was an adjustment. There was a compromise deal. There was some adjustment, but it's still way below the levels of funding that were available 12, 15 years ago. And significantly, when Ireland and Afghanistan were elevated to full membership, I think I want to put that in inverted commas, but elevated to full membership, the funding, the additional funding which they got as full members was actually taken out of the associates area of the budget. I mean, you really couldn't make that up. But rather than the countries with the the lion's share of the funding of the existing full members, rather than them taking a haircut in order to fund Ireland and Afghanistan, they put the burden on the associates. And nothing could more clearly state, I think, or indicate the priorities in the ICC board. The amount of money available through the media deals and the other commercial deals, which ICC increasingly makes, the amount of money available has risen exponentially over the past 20 years. And most of it goes to the full members, and within that, the lion's share is taken by India, and then to the rest of the full members, who already have very considerable income from their own local deals. The BCCI, to take the clearest case, the BCCI not only gets a large grant from the ICC, but for domestic bilateral cricket and for international bilateral cricket played in India and for domestic cricket in India, they have separate media deals, as Australia does, as all the full members do, with their own local media outlets. So they have a basic budget which comes from their own resources, plus on top of that, a huge grant from the ICC. And the smaller associates have to get by with a few $1,000s a year. Never, to use another biblical quote, never was it truer that to those that have shall be given.
Yes.
And it's outrageous.
Well, you mentioned the Gang of Three, the BCCI, ECB, and Cricket Australia.
Yep.
You describe them as greedy. How and why did you arrive at this conclusion?
By using my eyes, basically, and listening. Everything that has happened in international cricket over the past 20 years has been dominated by cricket administrators, not only in those three countries, but very significantly in those three countries, seeking to maximize the profitability of cricket above all else. How many examples do you need? India threatening to pull out of a tour of South Africa in order to get their own way over a specific incident. The ECB launching the 100 as this revolutionary new competition without regard to the consequences, I believe, without regard to the consequences for other formats, including T20, and indeed the domestic one-day competition, simply because they thought they could get more money that way.
Yes.
And if you look at the development policies of such countries, if you look at the BCCI's attitude towards the creation of a women's IPL, which brings us back to the question of franchises, of which I only answered part, I think. The commercialization of cricket, particularly in those three countries, but not only in those three countries, it has advantages, obviously, in terms of making more money available. But then the question is, what do you spend that money on? And I think then it's perhaps a subtler question, a more complex question. And there are other people who know more about this in relation to the specific countries. Gideon Hay, for example, who writes constantly and very, very effectively about Australian cricket politics. It's a genuine question whether those three countries, and indeed the fan base in those three countries, are getting value for money from the vast resources, comparatively vast resources, which those countries are able to bring in. One of my bugbears is the talk about markets. If you go back 15 years, I.S. Bindra's recommendation to the ICC was that the ICC should focus on the United States and China, because those were the two biggest potential markets for cricket.
Mm.
Now, whether China ever was a serious market for cricket is a question we could debate, and I don't believe it was. I think the United States is, and you guys will know much more about the ins and outs of this than I do. But if you look at the history of cricket governance and organization in the United States over the past 20 or 30 years, it's fairly clear that it has been, shall we say, a checkered history, and attempts to set things on the rails by, among others, the ICC, who at one point suspended the existing organization and stepped in and tried to create a new one. I think progress is clearly being made, even from the outside. It looks as if progress is being made, but it's not unqualified progress. There are still problems, and that is in a way in conflict with the perception that there is a huge market. Yes, there is a huge market. I was talking to you, Dennis, the other day about a novel by Joseph O'Neill called Netherland, which is about league cricket in New York. It's about a lot of other things, but it's also about league cricket in New York in the aftermath of 9/11. There is huge potential in the United States, but the question is how you actualize that, how you realize that, and how you ensure that the money that you do have, which is not enough, is spent in ways which really does create more cricketers on the field.
Yes, thank you.
That's the most important thing.
Now, let me continue in this direction, because you said ICC is an unfit governing body for cricket. Why do you consider ICC an unfit governing body? If you had the opportunity, what would you replace the ICC with?
It's not just me saying that. Look back to Lord Woolf's review. Lord Woolf was commissioned by the ICC to produce a report, to do a review and to produce a report on the current functioning of the ICC. That was in the aftermath of the extraordinary decision by the ICC board in the wake of the 2007 World Cup, not only to reduce the 50-over World Cup to 10 teams, but to restrict it to the then 10 full members. And that decision created such a storm that they were forced to walk it back. When they did walk it back and keep a 10-team World Cup, but open up at least a notional qualification process for it, they punished the associates who had objected by reducing the number of teams in the T20 World Cup, which is a fair indication of the way the ICC Executive Board is prepared to operate. In the wake of all of that, it was decided that even the ICC board was forced to accept that they needed a review. So Lord Woolf, who was a prominent retired British judge, was brought in to conduct the review. And he produced a report which is devastating in its critique of the financial arrangements of the ICC, the political arrangements of the ICC, and their governance in general. And within a week, the BCCI said, this document takes us nowhere, and binned it. But literally, Lord Wolfe said the ICC is not fit for purpose. And although there have been a few changes over the, 10 years nearly now, since Lord Wolfe's report was handed in, I don't believe that judgment is any less true now than it was 10 years ago. I think it's important. There are some very good people working in the ICC. And I often think about the ICC as being like a national government. Maybe any global governing sports body is, because you've got, on the one hand, you've got the executive board and the people behind the executive board who are, if you like the politicians, the parliament or whatever. But then you have the civil service, the public service, who are the people who are involved in umpire management and tournament organization and financial control and every aspect of the directly cricketing aspects, but also the support aspects of the entire operation. And many of them do a good job. Not all of them, I think, but many of them do a good job. But they have to do that job within the remit that they are given, within the strategic objectives which are set for them by the executive board and by the CEO, who is directly responsible to the executive board. And we've seen how the executive board of the ICC deals with its CEOs. You only have to read Malcolm Speed's book about his time running the ICC. Dennis Richardson has never really come out about what his experience was. But they have gone through a lot of CEOs, and few of them have left happy, I think. So there are fundamental weaknesses in a structure where an executive board, which tends to consult only the interests of its own constituency, and as far as I can see, no one else, who come to the table asking not what's good for cricket, but what's good for my organization. And necessarily it's the big guns. It is still the BCCI, the Cricket Australia and the ECB who have the most weight, and who are able to throw that weight around and do so on a regular basis. What would I replace it with?
Yes.
How would I change it?
Yeah, how would you change it? Make it better.
Yeah, it's a huge question, isn't it? Wiser heads than mine have looked at the structure. Somehow it has to be made more representative. It has to be made more independent of the big national boards. The national boards will never agree to that. So you know, in wild moments, you think, well, the associates are getting so little out of the ICC. What is the point? Why do they stay? Well, they stay because they do get some support. Even the little ones get a small amount of funding. They get the fact that they are members of the ICC, which is something which they can use to their local, to their National Olympic Committee, for example. We haven't even talked about the Olympic Games, but there's another can of worms.
Yes.
Again, held up for years and years and years because the BCCI was against it. So solely, really, because the BCCI was against it. So it's very hard to see a solution. It needs a strong coalition of forces, which would include some of the more powerful full members, to say, we have had enough of this. We recognize that if we compare ourselves with the International Rugby Board, if we compare ourselves with the Global Field Hockey Association, if we compare ourselves with basketball, if we compare ourselves with other global governing bodies of team sports, we can see that they have development plans which are genuinely geared towards a staged expansion of our international tournaments, men and women, which aim to give a greater say to the smaller powers, which ensure that the game genuinely does grow, and that the growth in the game on the field is reflected in changes in governance, which give increasing influence, if not power, to more and more countries.
You mentioned Jeff Allardyce was appointed as in the administration. What was it about Allardyce's administration role that caused you to question his appointment? He has now left, of course, and gone on elsewhere. But what was it that caused you to consider an appointment not up to par?
Well, I'm not sure I said that. I don't think I've ever said that.
His appointment caused you concern?
No, what caused me concern was that, having only just been appointed, he was sent out to defend the indefensible.
I see.
He had my sympathy. That was the point about my joke about having targets painted on your shoes so you can shoot yourself in the foot more accurately. It was just that he'd only just started in the job. He'd had to go through the nonsense of the abandonment of the Super League, the 13-team Super League. And the next thing that happens is he has to go out and say, but look at all this wonderful stuff we're going to do.
Why did he leave so quickly then?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. But honestly, would you stay in that job?
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of room in there for head scratching, should we say. One of the points that you were very strong on was associate member budget allocations. Yeah. You have spoken most forthrightly about the budget allocation to associate members. You may not be aware of the exact dollar amount for each associate, but my question is whether or not you are aware of the % decrease in the allocation of funds, and can you stand by your view that the Gang of Three is responsible for the decrease?
Well, the budget allocations are agreed by the executive board. And I am in no doubt that the most influential voices in the executive board are those of the Gang of Three. I do see figures from time to time, not that I'm necessarily supposed to, but I do see figures from time to time. The budget allocations are based on a formula. The formula itself is based on on-field performance, but a lot of other criteria as well. One of the fundamental problems, and this actually takes us into some interesting country, I think. One of the fundamental problems is that each associate country, I'm sure this doesn't apply to the full members, but each associate country has to supply an annual return of playing numbers, of umpire numbers, of coach numbers, of teams, of grounds, the number of turf pitches, a whole range of criteria, which are then ranked. So this is a different sort of ranking from the rankings we were talking about earlier, but each one is ranked. So if you have, let's say you have among the associates, the more umpires than 26 other countries, then you would be ranked 27th from the bottom on that criterion. And that is then weighted and fed into a formula which determines how many $1,000 you get for the following year. Those figures are self-reported. They are theoretically verified. How do you verify how many pitches there are in a country? How do you verify how many teams there are in a country? When you realize that the regional offices, the 5 regional offices of the ICC, so Americas, Europe, Africa, Asia, and East Asia Pacific, when you realize that those were substantially cut down, their funding, their staffing were substantially reduced at the same time that the high performance program was decimated. And effectively the global strategy from 2000 to 2010 was abandoned. One of the consequences of that was that the regional offices were given substantially reduced resources. If you want to check the number of teams, the number of actual competition matches, the number of coaches or umpires in, let us say, Suriname, how do you do that? The only way you can do that is by going to Suriname and looking. Does anybody have the time and the resources to do that? When was there last a check on, for example, Suriname? Let me tell you, Suriname is not a random example. So, and I'm not going to say any more than that. So, okay. But I know for a fact that countries, and now I'm not specifically talking about Suriname, I know for a fact that countries have cooked the books, have claimed, have counted, for example, when asked how many turf pitches there are, have counted every lane on a 5-pitch square as a separate turf pitch. Yeah?
Yeah.
So yes. you inflate the number of turf pitches by a factor of 5. Okay. That kind of thing, lying about membership numbers. I know that countries lie about membership numbers, about the number of clubs they have. So, and there is no check. So the system is fundamentally flawed. In a sense, it matters less because the amounts of money now available to the smaller associate members are so tiny that the advantages of fraud are relatively small. But still, it's a broken system. My point is, it's a broken system, and it seems that the ICC doesn't care.
Thank you. Let me find out if Jatin has any questions or comment he'd like to interject at this point. Jatin, are you hearing me?
Yes, I am. Give me a minute because
okay.
I got some crowd making noise around me. So give me about 2 minutes and I'll join back.
And Leon is still not?
Leon has now disappeared.
Okay, so it's just you and me then. Let's go back to the issue of, in your document, you mentioned ICC, and I'm not sure if this is an error in typing, but it says CRIIIO program.
No, it's not a typo.
Well, can you tell us what that is?
CRIO, I think that's how you pronounce it. Possibly CRIO.
Good.
I imagine that the 3 I's are supposed to represent stumps.
Fine. That's ingenious.
Yeah.
Yes.
And And Creo, you can find out a lot about it, or you can find out something about it on the ICC website. Creo is an entry-level program developed by the ICC to help countries introduce new players, particularly kids, to cricket.
Okay.
I don't think it's as bad as a lot of. It's fashionable among some of my fellow associate cricket journalists to laugh at Creo and talk about it as if it's absolute nonsense. I don't think it is absolute nonsense. But what I said in the article was, to make it truly effective, it needs lots of investment of time, energy, imagination, and ultimately money.
Right.
And if you look at what's happening on the ground in, let's say, the 10 or a dozen smallest European cricketing nations, ICC members.
Yes.
Probably the area I know most about. There are a lot of volunteers there, dedicated people, love cricket, all expats basically. You look at the way in which, you look at the media presence of the Czech Cricket Association on social media. They are terrific. I was writing weekly summaries of cricket across Europe for emerging cricket over the last northern summer, called the Euro Wrap. And every week I was able to access, it's not only true of the Czech Republic, it's true of Norway, although their website is a little harder to use. It's true of Austria. It's true of a number of countries. They have great people doing great work, building cricket grounds, rolling out Creo and other programs of their own. But they need help. They need practical help. And above all, they need money, because money buys time. And time to plan. I've done some of this kind of work myself in the Netherlands, and I know how much time and thought and energy and commitment it actually involves. So it's all very well to have a great program which is free to everybody and which is available. And so I'm not, as I say, I'm not knocking Creo as such.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is, if you really want Creo to work, you have to make it work. And that is not going to happen purely on the basis of the volunteers in country. It involves substantial investment from the center.
Thank you. Jatin, I see that Leon may be trying to...
I'm good to go.
Okay. And Leon has indicated that he's available if we can try and pull him in. Go ahead.
So first of all, Rod, I'd like to clarify on your statement that USA is a big market. But honestly speaking, I'm in this country for 35 years. And you know that the history, first game played in US. Why did not ICC tried their best to put this game until now? So I can tell you where we stand and how the feel of the members in this country. This thing is coming because of the immigrants. Population is growing, especially in last 25 years.
Yep.
Number two, USA is the only country you can find individuals and families coming from the cricket playing nation. You name the country who is playing cricket, you're going to find the citizen in this country. And the real good term is, these are the followers, not the mainstream Americans yet. They have not reached out them. The biggest thing is, it doesn't matter whether you look New Zealand, Australia, Afghanistan, Nepal, or any associate country or Big Ten playing nation, the currency value of dollar is high, period. You can compare this currency against all 104 cricket playing nations, and you can tell where the ICC's interest is heading. But that's just like to give you a heads up, is nothing has been changed in this country besides those media release, which everyone reads from the one direction. I haven't seen somebody telling the truth, but on the street, or if you are going at the grounds level, a lot of people even today believes nothing has changed. The key part is, it's a definitely good thing to have the local resources, the funding to survive the project. That is the key. But at the same time, we are looking at the volunteers. And I can tell you one thing on that side. I'm coming from soccer and baseball world. The volunteer coaches and umpires in this country is in highest numbers. Not only that, those are the ones who build the soccer and the baseball in this part of the world, where the cricket is working the other way around. They want the local resources. They want the local volunteers. But when it comes to the operation management and taking power, I will say, they want to run on foreign administrators. So how that's going to happen, you know? So Mike, the biggest thing I would like to ask you with your expertise, I'm listening for more than half hour. I will say what it will take to take this game into the country like US and China, because these are the huge market. We know some of the issues where the administration has absolutely no interest. They are coming with their agendas, talking straight. They care about their money and salaries. They bring the projects, get approval, get funding, bring something new, but nothing can sustain. If you look at last 15 years in US especially, look at how many administrators came, initiative something, they tell us the big project, the big hope, big expectation, and as soon as the administration leaves, we got to start all over. And every time, there's only one common thing is happening. Administrator is getting paid, and we are losing budget without action and efficient outcome. So in that sense, I know you have good expertise and knowledge. Let's talk about the positive thing. How we can improve, or what can be the trigger point besides ICC funding? It's tough to get. We all know that. And top of that, even I believe we cannot rely too much on an international governing body. You must be self-sustained. You must find your own strength to build on and make sure you have the reliable force to sustain the future projects. So I like to have suggestion or idea from you, what it is missing to fix this problem. It's been there for, I would say, 50 years now, nothing new.
Yeah, I mean, far be it from me to tell Americans how to organize their cricket. My emerging cricket colleague, Nate Hayes, would probably be a more interesting person to talk with about that. He's based in the US and he writes regularly for emerging cricket on minor league cricket and on US cricket generally. So he's much more of an expert on that than I am. I think the United States and Canada are in many ways similar, and they are very different from most other associate countries because they both have long cricketing histories. You know, it's one of those textbook facts that the first international cricket match was actually not between Australia and New Zealand, but Australia and England, but between the United States and Canada in 1843, I think, from memory. So it's a long history. At the turn of the 20th century, the gentlemen of Philadelphia were one of the strongest sides in the world, and in my view, one of the great historical mistakes, perhaps one of the greatest historical mistakes in all sport, was Australia, England, and South Africa not inviting the United States to become a founding member of the ICC. I think the ICC would have been a very different body, and the future of cricket would have been very different and cricket in America would have been very different had the United States been a recognized international cricket power before the First World War. So I think ceding that ground to baseball, which is effectively what they did, was a massive mistake. Yes, I think you're clearly right that there are fundamental social, economic, and organizational problems in American cricket, which all the attempts to solve them over the past 50 years have failed to do. I thought Major League Cricket, minor league cricket, that initiative looked to me to be interesting. Okay, I have reservations about franchise. On the other hand, I mean, I hate the whole IPL franchise thing. I think it's, I'm a conservative in these respects. I think it's bad for cricket. But I actually don't think you're ever going to succeed in selling a sport in the United States if you don't go the franchise route, because franchises are the only thing Americans understand. So I think you kind of have to go that way. How you find leaders with the moral character actually to work, and this is again the ICC question, how do you find leaders with the moral, ethical basis to behave decently, honorably, and in the interests of the game, rather than what the Australians call rorting the game for your own profit and for your own economic advantage? I don't know how you do that. The ICC has tried bringing in people from outside to help the USA develop its cricket. That hasn't worked. It probably has to come from the grassroots. But then you guys know better than I do the nature of the grassroots culture in American cricket, based as it is on immigrant communities from the Caribbean and from the subcontinent, with all their own peculiarities, rivalries, histories. How you overcome all of that, I don't know. Maybe college cricket is something that in the end will help. No? Yeah, Dennis nods, Jatin shakes his head. Yeah, I mean, I'm grasping at straws, but and that's why I recommended Joseph O'Brien's novel Netherland to Dennis the other day, and to you guys more generally today, because it's exactly what O'Neill looks at. The central character, apart from the narrator, who is Dutch, a Dutch banker living in New York, the central character of the novel is a Caribbean American who develops the idea of building an international cricket stadium in New York, and who is murdered for his troubles. And it is a brilliant book about the realities of playing cricket in New York and about that culture and how it operates. I see aspects of it in the Pakistani immigrant and Indian immigrant communities in the Netherlands. I was youth organizer. I was the youth coordinator for an Indian cricket club in Amsterdam for 4 years. And I've seen a lot of how that actually works in terms of teams which represent the club, but which are based on language communities from India. So the guys from Chennai don't want to play with the guys from Mumbai. They speak a different language. They want to talk their own language on the field. So you have teams which are not based on quality, not based on who are the best players, but based on who your friends are and which state in India you come from. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a given, but it has consequences for how the club is run, and it has consequences for how you get the best 11 players out on the field on a Sunday or a Saturday. So I'm not totally talking without experience when I say that I do recognize how deep these problems are. Maybe some really, really effective governance training would help. But then you have to have people who are prepared to take part in the governance training, who do actually want to learn how to do it better. And if your starting point is, I already know everything there is to know, and in any case, deep down, my main interest is just in getting as much money as I can for me and my people, then it's never going to go anywhere. Never going to go anywhere.
I can update on the minor league and major league. At the moment, in my opinion, we are thankful of those owners, mostly from subcontinent, who are putting the money and running the minor league. Okay. Yeah. But then there is a future is uncertain in terms of return. When we talk about those franchisees who are putting in a 6-digit figures as of now for season, what will be the future ahead? I don't think anyone has that on paper clearly. No. No. On top of that, going back to the issues, I think Americans are well aware of this game. This is the first country who got independence from the British before everybody else started getting independence from the Queen, I will say. And because of that, that was the initial setback that they left the cricket. They just want to dump everything what the British had. We don't want to follow that. That's kind of opinion they carry. And then we got the setback when the decline that ICC membership. I think the real Americans, the people who born in this country and belong to this country with their ancestor for, let's say, 100 years, they have not forgotten that it was an insult. And even today, when they try to bring more foreign administrators, they want to run it, they want to control it. But then the American side concern is how long we're going to keep continuing relying on foreigners and develop this game. And that is the real issue. It is not about how these, if you look at the growth of the cricket in terms of academies, in terms of the clubs, in terms of the teams, in terms of the competitions, and in terms of the memberships, it's all growing. But if you look at that same thing on the other side, there's, I will say, more than 98% Americans even today does not follow cricket. Mm-hmm. And everyone talks about it. We want to go mainstream. We're going to do this. We're going to do something in schools. But where is the action? Everyone brings the nice projects, nice, beautiful budgets, I will say. But then comes back to the same, is like how we can attract the American people to be part of this game. Because when you look at the USA team at the moment, I think there's only 1 or 2 born in US. Rest of the born in US, there are few who went outside the US and they are being trained and playing the higher level in different country, and they're coming back because of that eligibility, because they were originally born in this country. But looking at the ground look, means groundworks and the nurturing the players from the entry level, this is what it's missing. And no doubt, ICC recently put together a foundation coaching program, but then there is not much out there in umpiring side. And even today, if you look at the landscape in US, we don't have that many local umpires in terms of quality knowledge to go up the higher level. And I can 100% say we don't have that many adequate coaches in this country.
But
And
that's
in
no
that
different.
mix, in that mix, we relying on foreigners, means outside people, and some of them coming with not much knowledge. They come, provide you nice presentations and nice manuals, not beyond that. And that is the what it's missing. And I think people in this country who are involved in cricket for, let's say, 30 plus years, they know more about problems than these people are coming in and trying to figure out how to fix it.
Yeah. Okay, so fix it yourselves then. But
Yeah.
you don't. You can't. You can't.
Yeah.
Can I just draw your attention to the fact and ask whether anybody in American cricket has realized that you have a vice president of mixed Indian and Afro-Caribbean extraction? Who in American cricket has talked to Kamala Harris and said, lady, we need you?
Yes. Good point.
I can tell you on that one. No, I'm coming to on that one. We are part of the Cricket Hall of Fame. I'm one of the Cricket Hall of Famer, and this issue came out when the vice president became a elected lady at the top. Is the first woman with that kind of mix.
Yeah.
Also the first tradition of that. But I can tell you one thing. There are efforts made to reach out, but in this country, government has nothing to do with it. Every sports in this country is like a business.
Self-government.
Professional sport. We don't have sports minister. We don't have sports ministry. We don't have the sports budget, and don't even expect that any congressman can give you some sort of money as a grant or scholarship. No, they might pitch in some help. They might help you some way. They might help you to guide you how to develop and help you on the local infrastructure, nothing else. So with that said, even the people from Jamaica, where Kamala Harris' father, right? And the mother from India, we all know these things. But then it again goes back square to one. Even she supports you, even she gives you some funding, where we are going. We don't have that infrastructure with the proper plan, right? And the top of that, the biggest thing is hurting. I'm preaching for last 7 years. If you look at the US sports, the professional sports, they drop those players from the college sports, which is the NCAA. Then they scout their all players to play under the NCAA. Remember, with the grants. So actually the college education is sports and academics combined together. They like to maintain that 2.0 GPA, and at the same time, they like to give you the money to you so you can play sports by being in that college and trying to help you become the professional. And then those players are coming from the high school where they are playing for high school, let's say 4 years, and they become the college player where this automatic scholarships comes as a support to continue with the sport. And then high school player gets from the middle school. What the cricket is trying to do, even today, is they're trying to find from players from academies, local community programs, and now it's a flow of foreign players coming in and getting in straight to the team. So what is the point for the American kid to be part of the cricket? We know that there are 1 million points out there where we can say American is not interested in cricket, but we have not found one positive point which we can convince these people why they need to play cricket.
Jatin and Rod. Rod, it's been an hour of your time, and I know that your time is precious. I'm wondering if perhaps what we can do is take a rain check from you and have you back so that we still have quite a number of questions that are unanswered. And I'd like to invite you to come back and join us on another occasion where we can finish this little discussion. I know we're missing Leon, and he had a question or two, which we're not able to get to at the moment. but if you can, give us a commitment, we'd be happy to invite you to come back and join us on another occasion.
Happy to do that. Two things. One, I do think if you want to get into the weeds, as it were, of American cricket, Nate Hayes would be a good person to talk to. I can give you his email address, Dennis. He writes regularly about American cricket for Immersion Cricket. You'll see all his stuff there.
May I interrupt you 1 second and say I have reached out to Nate on a couple of occasions. I sent him an email message attempting to get him to come back on our show. He was on our show sometime about a year or so ago.
Okay.
And so I know of him, and I've been trying to reach out to him in the last 6 months. Since that first communication with you, I had communicated with Nate as well on another matter. He has not yet responded. But since you may have a closer connection, maybe my email message.
I'll give him a little nudge.
Yes. Let him know where
the other thing is you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing you need to know is that some interference there. We are planning to fly back to the Netherlands at the end of March.
Okay.
Leaving here on the 29th of March. So around the end of March wouldn't be a good time. Sometime in the next 2 or 3 weeks would be fine. And then from April onwards, hopefully we will be in the Netherlands again, where I will be covering Dutch cricket in the summer.
Right. Now, you perhaps what you could do for us is give us a fixed couple of dates in the future, and we will make it our business to liaise with you and get you back on. But before you go, I had one question for you on the Dutch side of things. As one who studied them in the Netherlands, what did you think of and how would you rate their performance in the recently completed championship? And I'll try to make that one the last one.
You mean the T20 Cup?
Yes, yes. How did you rate their performance? Yes.
A disaster, I think, would be the fairest description. It didn't go well. I don't think anybody thinks it went well. They were underprepared through a number of factors, not by any means all of them their own fault. They did attempt to get some preliminary games, which didn't happen. They have been, obviously it's been difficult because so many of the team are contracted to English counties. So during the northern summer, and even when they played against Ireland in the 13-team Super League, they only had about half the core members of the team who play for English counties. They weren't released for whatever reason.
Oh, sad.
So they were without Van der Merwe. They were without Ryan Tanduskate, who hadn't yet retired. They were without Colin Ackerman. So a number of their county contracted players who are themselves, of course, expats on Dutch passports. I mean, they're members of the Dutch diaspora, but who have Dutch passports. They weren't available for any kind of build-up. So when they assembled in the UAE, it was the first time that group had all been together since the 2019 qualifier.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's not ideal preparation.
Right. Right.
So I think that was a factor. Ryan Campbell, the coach, said before the tournament started, quite honestly, he said that he had no idea who his best 11 were, what his starting 11 should be.
Yes.
And he made a number of selectorial decisions, not all of which worked out. Some of which were criticized by some people, not by me, I have to say, but some people were very critical even before the game started. Some things worked, some things didn't. It's a strong squad. It undoubtedly underperformed even before it was annihilated by Sri Lanka. Even in the first two games, they did not do as well as they should have done.
Yes.
And nobody would pretend otherwise. There are deeper historical factors to do with the number of contracted players, to do with the number of games they play, even when COVID is not a factor, particularly against full members. The development pathways in the Netherlands do not exist in the way that they should. There is effectively no A team. So, I mean, there are so many, yeah, that's a subject for another hour, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was deeply disappointing. They did a little better in the half match they played in South Africa a month later, where they actually started very well. They did well to contain South Africa and started in the few overs before the rain. They started pretty well. When they're at full strength, they are capable of competing with full member sides over 50 overs a side. They did not do well against Afghanistan. But again, the preparation was not as good as it might have been. They were unable to arrange matches against Oman, who were hosting them. Oman, Qatar, I'm losing track. And a lot of umpiring decisions went against them. I'm very I don't like to say the umpires were a significant factor, but I think the umpires were a significant. I genuinely think the umpires were a significant factor across those three games, to an extent that I think was actually quite outrageous. And I think it was a powerful argument for neutral umpires.
Right. Well,
yeah. So yeah, disappointing.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rod, for your time. You gave us a great deal of your time today, and we really truly appreciate it. So, on behalf of the Cricket Show, I'd like to thank you and extract two promises from you. One, that you will come back soon. You'll let us know when you're available. And two,
absolutely,
you will reach out to Nate and let him know that I am attempting to reach out to him, because I have a great deal of questions and comments I'm looking for on his behalf, from his perspective, because he's Native American and he would certainly have plenty to tell us about how he views the development of the game here. So those two promises, absolutely. Thank you. And I'll have email and we'll reach out by email. I'm sorry Leon wasn't able to join us more, but hopefully the next session he will be able to. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. See you today.
Pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Coach Jatin. Yes. Thank you.
See you.
Good night.
See ya.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.